Jeremy Corbyn, remember him, has criticised the UK and the West for supplying Ukraine with weapons, saying, and I quote, pouring arms in will prolong and exaggerate the war. He said sending weapons to Kyiv as it tries to defend itself against the Russian invasion will not bring an end to the conflict. His interview was with the Russian-Lebanese TV station, it says here, Al Mayadeen, earlier this week. This is a little of what he said.
It isn't going to bring about a solution. It's only going to prolong and exaggerate this war. We might be in for years and years of a war in the Ukraine. But then the world woke up and suddenly realized that Russia and Ukraine are the world's biggest grain exporters, and something has to be done. So they came to an agreement, and I hope it holds, to export grain through Odessa and through the Bosphorus to the rest of the world. That is a good move. But at the same time, putting more and more arms into Ukraine isn't going to bring about it. What I find disappointing is that hardly any of the world's leaders use the word peace. They always use the language of more war and more bellicose war.
Jeremy Corbyn. Let's unpack some of that with first Gwythian Prins, who's emeritus research professor at the LSE, served as advisor to both NATO and the Ministry of Defence, and joins me now. First point from this, if we can, Professor, this war could go on for years and years and years, says Jeremy Corbyn. Do you concur?
Well, if we follow Mr. Corbyn's advice, of course that's so. Look, here, I'm grateful to Mr. Corbyn that he reminds us why Sir Richard Dearlove, the chief of the Secret Intelligence Service, was correct in warning the nation in 2019 that allowing this man anywhere near the security of this country would pose a mortal threat to us. This is the magic grandpa who stands exactly on his head. Because listening to that clip that you just played, Nick, look, everybody serious who knows anything about the horrible business of war knows that if you desire peace, you prepare for war. The way to get less killing, shorter war, is to intensify it at this time, which is exactly what we're doing.
But there's no success as yet, Professor.
No, that I don't agree. There is success. It's not as decisive as it might be if we in the West had not, we've got ourselves more or less together, but we need to have even more resolve. Because, this is no longer playtime. This is the real world, and we're dealing with a real signed-up psychopath here. Mr. Putin is going to go on and on and on, and we have to decide whether we think that the Ukrainians are fighting for the freedom and democracy that we believe in or not. I believe they are. It's clear that Mr. Johnson believes they are. It's clear that both of the contestants for the prime ministership, particularly Miss Truss, believes that. They're correct. And so, therefore, as usual, I'm sorry to say, this part of the left in Britain, represented by Mr. Corbyn, it takes the word peace, which is an important concept and a noble one, which we all believe in, and they somehow arrogantly pretend that it belongs to them. How dare they?
The point I was making about the war is it is reported that, and in the fog of this war it's difficult to discern what's the truth, but that Russia have regained certain parts of Ukraine, though. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't appear to be working yet. Or
Well, wait a minute. Yes, in all wars there are tactical advances and tactical retreats. To that you can counter the fact that as the summer offensive, which is no secret to anybody listening to this program, as the Ukrainian summer offensive around Kharkiv develops, they've reportedly taken back 50-odd villages in the last few days. And this is very largely due to the arrival of long-range, highly precise Western weapons, which the Russians, they've gone berserk, and they have their spies running around trying to find them, which tells us we're doing the right thing.
And on the subject of doing the right thing, again, I think your expression was something like, if you want to bring about peace, prepare for war. Should the West, should Britain be sending more kit?
Yes.
More personnel?
Yes, we're doing all of those things. We've just agreed. We are, as we speak, Nick, agreeing to train another 10,000 Ukrainians through the extension of Operation Orbital, which was the British Army training before this war began, 22,000 Ukrainian troops. We have Ukrainians who are being trained on a range of equipments, including naval equipments, by the way, including minesweepers. So, this is a full commitment, and it needs to be. because for two reasons, if I may just end on this point.
Please.
Yes, we have to support the Ukrainians. Of course the Ukrainians are defective. What nation is not? It's a choice of, it's not a choice of perfection and evil. It's lesser evils. But if we do not hold firm on this line, not only does Putin win, but also so does Xi Jinping. Because deterrence of Xi Jinping is crucially, in my view, is crucially contingent upon ensuring that Putin is not seen to succeed in Ukraine.
And to those who say, if Ukraine is on fire, lastly, all the West is doing is continue to pour petrol on the flames, how would you respond?
They don't understand anything that they're talking about. Anybody who understands anything to do with war knows that the Roman proverb, si vis pacem para bellum, if you desire peace, prepare for war, it's the motto of the Royal Navy, by the way, that is a correct description of the real world, not the fantasy world of magic grandpas.
Gwythian Prins, thank you. You're Emeritus Research Professor at LSE, former advisor to NATO and the Ministry of Defence. Listening to that is Mary Dejevsky, who's Foreign Affairs columnist for The Independent and served as correspondent in Moscow for The Times. Again, just starting with an overview of where Jeremy Corbyn's position is. How do you respond? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'm probably one of those sort of magic-minded grandfathers or whatever who Gwyn Prince referred to, because I do think there is quite a lot of merit in what Jeremy Corbyn was saying, that sending ever more and ever more powerful weapons to Ukraine only perpetuates and ups the ante in this war. And it's true that foreign leaders who in the past might have been calling for peace and trying to organise some sort of negotiations have completely been absent in doing any of this pretty much since the start.
Isn't that what Emmanuel Macron tried to bring about?
Yes, and he was right to do that.
But he didn't get anywhere, which would seem to...
He didn't get anywhere because he was obstructed by the British and the Americans who didn't want the Ukrainians to settle. In fact, the terms that they would settle, the terms that they would have been able to settle on back in February could very well be better terms than they may be forced to accept in the future. And that's the biggest tragedy of what's going on in Ukraine.
Why do you believe it is in the interest of the UK and the US and perhaps other parties not to bring about an earlier peace?
Well, I think it's got rather out of control to the point where, you have to decide at what point you argue for peace being a better prospect than war.
But I don't see what's in it.
The British and the Americans are not arguing that. They're saying that Ukraine has to fight, if possible, to win.
But what's in it for Britain and the US to do that? They're committing vast sums of money that I'm sure they'd both like to use elsewhere. In the case of other European parties or allies, they're having enormous energy supplies issues. You look at Germany and other countries. What's in it for them?
No, I agree. And if you go back a few weeks to much earlier in this war, then you hear the Americans and you hear possibly our next Prime Minister saying that the purpose of supporting Ukraine in this war is, on the one hand, it's what they talk about, the values agenda and supporting right against aggression, which to an extent I can understand. But the other argument is that we have to take on Russia and we have to weaken Russia. And this is a way of doing it. They seem to see it as an opportunity
to sell out Ukraine.
To
sell out Ukraine, effectively, to weaken Russia. Is that what you're saying? The thinking is?
What I'm saying is that by supporting Ukraine with ever more and ever heavier weapons, we are storing up a hostage to fortune for the future,
Mary,
both in cost and security measures, because Ukraine cannot defend itself by itself. It will depend on the West for the foreseeable future.
Mary, you referenced Professor Prins. I understand he's on the line and he's very keen to put a question to you. You don't have to. Would you take a question from the Professor, or would you rather move on?
I'd actually prefer to carry on, because I think there are two other points of Gwyn Prince's that I'd actually like to take issue with.
I think respectfully, if you're going to take it, you've commented already. I would say, I want you to take issue, and I'll delay the news for you to take issue. But I think then I need to let him take issue with you. Is that a deal we can do?
If you let me take issue with the 2 points that he raised before.
Right, if you're waiting for the news, you've got a long way. Your 2 points I'd like to make. Mary Dejevsky, and then I will bring the Professor in. Mary, do go ahead.
One of them is that Professor Prins quoted the prescience of Sir Richard Dearlove. I would like to point out that Sir Richard Dearlove was one of the people who was responsible for taking and for supporting the intelligence, the false intelligence that took the UK into war in Iraq. Okay. That's the first thing. Yes. The second thing is that he talked about, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Yes.
We're not preparing for war. We are in a war. We are supplying Ukraine with weapons. It has been at war since February the 24th. Okay. This is not preparing for war.
We're in it. Okay, please stay on the line. Thank you for those 2 points. Let's go back to Professor Gwyn Prince. Professor.
Yes, well, Mary Dejevsky, I'm sorry to say that's a typical slur. The head of the Secret Intelligence Service, Sir Richard Dearlove, made the point specifically in the context that I originally stated it. Whatever else she may think about what he said, I'm talking about what he said about Mr. Corbyn as a risk to national security. That's the only point. And on the question of, yes, we're in war, of course we're in the war. May I respectfully ask Mr. Dejevsky, who started this war? Was it the Ukrainians? Of course, the Russians say it was, but everybody knows it wasn't. This is a war of aggression. This is a war that is in breach of all of the laws of international peace and security, which I assume that people of her side of the debate like to support, because they come from the United Nations and the United Nations legal codes.
To boil this down, Mary, who started the conflict? Mary.
Well, I think in the immediate terms, as we look at it, obviously Russia started it by invading. I did not expect Russia to invade. I was horrified by Russia invading. Russia was wrong to invade. But in the longer term, when you look back at the opportunities that there were to prevent this war, at the way that the West, in particular the United States and the British, have behaved towards Russia in the last 5, 10, even 20 years, and particularly the way it supported the joining of many other countries in the Eastern Central Europe to Russia, to NATO, which Russia sees as a direct threat. That has to be taken into account as part of the background.
It was aggression from the West, in a way, Professor.
What total rubbish. I mean, I'm sorry, let's be blunt about this. Are we saying, Mr. Dejevsky, that independent sovereign states, and I am delighted that the former members of the Warsaw Pact recovered their sovereignty. I had the honor when working in headquarters at NATO to play a small role in helping in that process. Are we saying that they are to put their sovereignty in hock to the will of a dictator, and a pathological dictator in Mr. Putin? Why is it that the West has taken the position that we have done? Of course, we are partly responsible, I fully agree, because we allowed Mr. Putin to get away with it in Georgia, and we allowed him to get away with it in Crimea. It never pays to allow dictators to go the first step. Did we not learn that in the 1930s?
And what we have learned is we must get to a very delayed news bulletin. I'm grateful to you both. Thank you. So many questions you'd like to ask of each other. I must draw a veil over it. Gwythian Prins, Emeritus Professor of the LSE. Thank you, Mary Dejevsky, Foreign Affairs columnist for The Independent.